The more information that we learn about the Idaho 4 case, the more confusing that it becomes. Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about a detail that I think is extremely important in the Idaho 4 case. Now, we haven't heard a lot about this detail, and I think a lot of the reason is because it really can't be confirmed. Who exactly was inside the King Roadhouse from the afternoon of Saturday, November 12th, until law enforcement arrived at the crime scene just after noon on Sunday, November 13th? Now, we don't really know who was in and out of this house over this weekend. You know, the only reason that law enforcement believes that there were only 6 people, that these 6 people were inside the King Roadhouse, is because that's what they're being told by Bethany and Dylan. So Bethany and Dylan basically control the narrative because there's nobody else there to confirm what Bethany and Dylan are saying. So my question is, who exactly was inside this house over this weekend? There could have been a number of people inside this house, and I believe that there was. Now, we know that the girls who lived in this house were all in sororities. We also know that Ethan was a member of Sigma Chi. So this is 6 different people living under one roof, which means that this is 6 different people with all different friends. They all have different friend groups. And this house, at 1122 King Road is basically, it's off campus. So let's remember that. But it's right in the middle of student housing. A lot of their friends are their neighbors. A lot of their friends live around the King Roadhouse. The sorority house and the fraternity houses are just right down the street. It's a quick walk to the King Roadhouse. Now, we know from the Banfield footage that there were a lot of parties going on that night. This was a big weekend for the students at the University of Idaho. They had a big football game that Saturday night, and a lot of the students were leaving to go back home for the winter holiday. So there were a lot of parties going on. We know that Sigma Chi was having a big party, and there was a lot of students walking around this area. Now, where the King Road house was located, a lot of these students were walking by this house. So my question is, who exactly was inside this house? We have no idea who was inside the King Road house Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and Sunday morning. There could have been a number of people in and out of this house. These victims and these roommates had a lot of friends. They knew a lot of people. And the King Roadhouse was a popular hangout spot. Now, we only know where 2 of these victims were at because of surveillance video. We know that Kaylee and Maddie were at the Corner Club because we've seen them on surveillance video. And we know that they were also at the Grub Truck because the Grub Truck streams their customers. So the only reason that we know where Kaylee and Maddie were for, say, 4 hours, because Olivia Gonzalez said that Kaylee and Maddie left the house at just after 10 p.m. And they returned at just a few minutes before 2 a.m. So we know where Kaylee and Maddie were for those 4 hours. But what about the rest of the time? And what about the rest of the roommates? We don't know where Dylan or Bethany were at. We really have no solid, confirmation of where Ethan and Xana were at. There's two different stories about Xana and Ethan. There's one story that Xana and Ethan were at the Sigma Chi party until 1:45 a.m. And then Xana's dad claims that Xana and Ethan were at the King Roadhouse at midnight watching movies and eating pizza. So there's two different stories as far as Xana and Ethan, but there's no video or anything like that. So we don't know exactly what they were doing during all of this time. We don't know what Dylan and Bethany were doing. And we only know what Kaylee and Maddie were doing for those 4 hours. So we don't know what was happening inside the King Roadhouse outside of those 4 hours, with Kaylee and Maddie. And we don't know what was happening inside the house at all with the rest of the roommates. Now, I know people are going to say that Ethan did not live at the King Roadhouse, so he shouldn't be included as a roommate. But in my opinion, I do believe that Ethan was staying at the King Roadhouse. Xana's dad stated in an interview that this was the first time that Xana had ever lived with a boyfriend. So I do believe that Ethan was living at the King Roadhouse. And the only reason I even bring that up is because this would mean that in addition to the other roommates' friends, this would also mean that Ethan's friends and fraternity brothers were also probably hanging out at the King Roadhouse as well. So that's important to know. I don't feel like law enforcement can even really confirm everyone who was inside this house. They basically have to take Dylan and Bethany's word for it. And, their stories don't really add up. So is it possible that there were people inside this house that law enforcement has no idea about? The only thing that we have to go off of is phone records and Dylan and Bethany's statements. As far as like Kaylee and Maddie calling Jack D, repeatedly at just before 3 a.m., we don't really even know that Kaylee and Maddie were inside the house when they were making those calls. I think a lot of us, I know that when I heard this information, I kind of pictured it in my head that Kaylee and Maddie were upstairs calling Jack D. But really, Kaylee and Maddie might not even have been in the house at all when they were making these calls. We don't know any of this information. Is it possible that there may have been some people inside the King Roadhouse on this particular weekend, or maybe even during the time of the crimes, who have relatives in powerful positions in Moscow, Idaho? I mean, it's very possible that some of the people in this house may have had relatives who have a lot of influence at the University of Idaho. Maybe they donate a lot of money to the university. Now, we know that the University of Idaho was involved with every step of this investigation. Now, let's remember, this house is not on campus. This house is off campus. So students live in this neighborhood and non-students live in this neighborhood as well, because this house is not on campus grounds. It's not part of the University of Idaho. Yet the University of Idaho was very involved in this investigation. So it's kind of strange that the University of Idaho ended up receiving a lot of money after these crimes occurred. Not only did they receive a lot of money, but they were also given or donated the King Roadhouse. So because the King Roadhouse was not owned by the University of Idaho, it was owned by private investors from Colorado. So these private investors, whose job basically it is to invest money to make more money, gave the University of Idaho the King Roadhouse. So did the University of Idaho become heavily involved in this investigation in order to maybe try to protect some of the individuals who may have been in this house whose relatives are influential at this university? Is the university trying to protect, somebody who, or some people who were inside the King Roadhouse who have relatives who donate a lot of money to the university? Because it seems very strange that the university would be involved in the investigation. This is a college university, not a law enforcement agency. So it seems strange that this university would be so heavily involved and influential in this investigation. Because it's very possible that maybe they're trying to protect, people who are in this house that are related to some of their major donors. A lot of these people donate a lot of money. And this is money that's used to build more buildings and, fund this university. That's what universities do. Universities love money. They're on that constant grind to get more money. Let's talk about the sororities and the fraternities. We know that these are powerful organizations within the University of Idaho. It's very possible that there may have been someone or some people inside the King Roadhouse that were possibly involved in these crimes, who have very powerful relatives. A lot of these individuals that are in these fraternities and sororities have parents who are very powerful individuals in the community. So, is it possible that the sororities and the fraternities are protecting people who may have been inside this King Roadhouse? It's just kind of the way that things work. People that have money and power usually play by a different set of rules. And it seems as though in this very small town of Moscow, Idaho, that there's a lot of influence from the University of Idaho, as well as the fraternities and the sororities. So it seems very likely that if someone who was associated with these organizations, or somebody who's related to people who donate a lot of money to the university, it just seems likely that they would try to protect these people. In my opinion, it's extremely important to know who exactly was inside this house over that weekend. And it's not something that really can be confirmed other than with Dylan and Bethany. There's probably not too many people that are going to come out and admit that they were in the house at the time of these crimes. And of course, they're not going to admit if they were part of these crimes. So the only way that we know, and the only way that law enforcement knows that, who was inside the King Roadhouse is because of Dylan and Bethany. They're the only ones who were left alive in this crime scene. So they control the narrative. Now, Dylan and Bethany have said that it was these 6 people, 4 victims, and then Dylan and Bethany. So as complicated as this investigation has become, with all of this digital technology and following the victim around on street cams and, triangulation of cell towers and all of this complicated information, it's very possible that the answer lies simply with the people who were inside the King Roadhouse over this weekend of November 12th and 13th. Maybe it's not as complicated as law enforcement is having us believe. Because in my opinion, I feel like the answer lies within the people inside this house. So in my opinion, it's very possible that there's people who are being protected who were inside this King Roadhouse at the time of these crimes. And I feel like they're being protected because of who they're related to and because of the power and the influence that these people may have on the University of Idaho. So I feel like it's very possible that this is all a distraction. We know that there's multiple agencies working on this case. And there's a lot of extremely intelligent individuals within these agencies. So why is everything so confusing? And why aren't these pieces fitting together? Maybe that's by design. Maybe that's the strategy to basically distract us, basically say, look over here, so we're not paying attention to what's going on over here. It's very possible that there were people inside this house that are being protected. And it's possible that they're being protected because of who they're related to. Because they're related to people with money and power and people that donate heavily to this university. I feel like all of these conflicting statements, with regards to the investigation, are being put out there on purpose to confuse us. I feel like it's all a distraction. This is all a distraction, in my opinion, from something much bigger than what we're seeing. I'm going to talk about this in a future video because in my last community post, I talked about a theory that I'm going to be talking about. And I wanted to do this video first to kind of lead into this video that I'm going to do about this theory. Because this theory is kind of off the wall, but it is very possible. And, we're going to talk about some of these distractions and why the prosecution would use this type of strategy. So stay tuned for my next video, and thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see you soon.